Something interesting that you may or may not know about me is that I was a former competitive powerlifter and a powerlifting coach. So you could probably put two and two together, especially as my clients and the way that I coach. I'm very passionate. I am very actionable. And I'm truly like your biggest cheerleader. And so a lot of times I find myself running parallels between what I learned from being a competitor, from being a fitness coach, and just from our health and health being a constant in my life that absolutely applies to business. And today, I want to talk about specifically one of the most important things that we need to apply to our businesses that I learned from training as a competitive powerlifter. So, as a competitive powerlifter, as somebody who has trained for, oh my gosh, we are coming up on 14 years of consistent training, which honestly, that's a whole episode in itself, not necessarily about my training, but about the importance of consistency, because consistency and repetition and not always chasing the shiny thing are some of the most impactful things that we can do as business owners. The hard part is that we have so many ideas and we are so innovative and we are creators as entrepreneurs. And so a lot of times when stuff starts to feel boring, we start to create problems that don't exist. But that's a story for a different day. Today, we're talking about something called periodization. And periodization in training, to give you the short summary of it, it is a way to periodize your training so that your volume, your frequency, and the overall load of your training oscillates so that you don't overtrain. And so how does this apply to our business? At the end of the day, entrepreneurship, and especially the intersection of entrepreneurship and motherhood, is a one-way ticket to burnout, period. It is the easiest way to become overwhelmed is by choosing entrepreneurship and also being a mom. So that being said, and knowing that, we have to have very clear boundaries and structure in place and a plan so that we don't get there. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to reach the end of your life and look back and think, man, I made a lot of money and I didn't enjoy it. And I don't have good memories with my family, or look at all the moments that I missed. I think if we were to really step back and look at the hierarchy of things, our happiness, our fulfillment, our memories that we're able to make with our children and with our families are some of the most important things to us. I don't think that when we get to the end of our days, we would ever look back and regret putting things in place that gave us a life that was enjoyable. I think that we would regret not putting those things in place. I think that we would regret thinking about how we spent so much time working to create more and more money that didn't create happiness. And that's where we often get stuck. And so this idea of periodization and how it applies to our businesses is that when we think about the reality that we are set up as mothers and entrepreneurs to be constantly overwhelmed, to hit periods of burnout, to feel like we're spinning, to feel like we're constantly treading water or we're being reactive. When we know that we're on that path, we have to implement change that allows us to have some padding, that allows us to not fully get there, that allows us to, when we're teetering on the edge of burnout, to pull ourselves back. And so what does that look like, right? So in training, it looks like there are times where you're pushing either your volume, you're pushing the weight itself and the heaviness of what you're carrying. In business, it looks the same. It looks like we have periods of time where we are pushing and then periods of time where we are also pulling back. This is why in any good training program, you have rest days or recovery days. And so we need to apply the same to our business. And so these are a few things that in thinking about this idea of periodization and like what it actually looks like when we apply it to our business, these are a few things that I've applied to my business to be able to still have work-life balance and be able to succeed, even adding 3 kids to our family. And I want to share these things with you specifically so that you can apply them to your business so that you can have more of a periodization model that will allow for not just greater balance in your life and more enjoyment, but the thing that most people don't realize is that we need this greater enjoyment so that we can sustain. Because if we look again back to training, you cannot lift at 90% plus of your max capacity all the time. You will get hurt, right? And in business, we cannot run full throttle for long periods of time. We will burn out. We will see health issues. We will have, issues in our relationships. Things around us and within us will start to crumble. And I don't say that to scare you because there's many of you that have probably felt some effect of this, but there are a lot of clients that come to me that recognize even their own health is suffering, their marriages are suffering. They realize they're just not, they've built this successful business, but they are not personally fulfilled. And so we have to have this periodization in our businesses in order to actually sustain our businesses. A successful business has profit and has efficiencies and structure in place that allows for us to keep going. And it's simple and it's something that we know, but it's easy to lose sight of is because we glorify everything being quick. And the reality is that quicker isn't better because quicker and the things that we do in push periods are not meant to be sustained long term. So periodization and periodizing your business. What is it? What does it look like? First, it is tracking your capacity. When you start in business, you have no idea of your capacity because you're just pushing. The first few years of business are generally all about just bringing as many sales in the door as possible so that you can either leave the full-time job that you're at or replace that income because you've already left. And so this is why I do believe that no matter what stage of business you're in, we can incorporate things for you to still have some sort of work-life balance. I don't believe that just because you're in the first few years of business that you need to be hustling and grinding 24/7, especially as a mom. That being said, the push period is a little bit more. It's a little bit heavier, if you will, in these first few years of business because there's a real need that has to be fulfilled financially. But then you get to a point where you're established, you've built a great client base, your profit is there, your revenue is there, you're getting referrals, you're retaining clients, you have your messaging clear, and things are essentially working, right? But in this time period, there has never been a look at what can you truly do and lead and hold on to capacity-wise, right? So if you are a service-based business owner, you need to know how many services can you deliver in what time period? How many meetings can you take on per week, per month, per quarter? Any of the services that you provide, you should have a clear picture of how many of those services you can provide at any given time. Because one of the shifts that's underlying when we go from being new and running on fumes and trying to build to sustaining and trying to scale and stack on top of what we've built is that we have to move from this mindset of scarcity to one of abundance and one of trust. And that shift requires a completely different conversation than we're having today, but it is part of this shift that you have to make. And so periodization in your business requires you to track your capacity. You need to know when you're full, when you're going to be out of time, when you're going to be out of energy, and figure that out. So when you get to capacity, you can focus on, okay, what do I need to do to sustain? And how can I become more efficient in the things that I'm doing so that I can sustain? Because again, once you reach that threshold of capacity, we're talking about, okay, I'm full. And how long can I operate at this fullness? And what do my breaks look like so that I can maintain this fullness? So tracking your capacity. I give all my clients a capacity tracker that they have the freedom to use so they can see, again, based upon their services, because I'm working with people in all industries, this looks different for everybody. But we need to know, what is your capacity? And part of this is determined by your emotions and your energy. And then part of it is determined simply by your time and what you are willing to give in a place that still allows you to show up for your family. What is your capacity? You need to track it. The second thing, in order to apply periodization to your business, is actually scheduling your rest and your time off. When I am working with clients and we make the shift from them being very busy and very overwhelmed and having very full calendars, and we pull back on their schedule, because one of the first things that we do is audit their time and look at how you're spending your time, where it's going, and where can we pull back without decreasing your profit. And we don't mark for time off. We know our schedules for when we're working, but we don't have a schedule for when we're not working. And so one of the things that I've done every year is I've pulled up my kids' school calendar. I've pulled up like any events, like all of my calendars, I'm pulling them up and I'm marking off like weeks, like, Christmas break that my kids are home, spring break, like anything like that. I'm marking off times where I'm going to be off work so that I can plan around that. It's such a simple concept, but we don't think to put this rest first, because if we know that, okay, every quarter I'm going to take a full week off where I have no meetings, and so all my meetings need to be scheduled around that. If we don't know that, then we end up, 3/4 of the way through the year and realizing we haven't had a break from work. And so making sure that you schedule your rest, schedule your time off, just the same way that you plan your work schedule. This is an uncomfortable shift for my clients to make. But what I notice is that when we have a plan ahead of time for when they're going to be off, rather than it being this floating, elusive thing that is like, hey, we are going to take 1 week off every quarter. It's like, okay, sounds great. But instead, we're like, okay, it's going to be this week. And so we're going to tell team to make sure that we plan all meetings, all projects, all services to be around that. And then it actually becomes real. So you need to be scheduling when you're pulling back, right? And then you also, the third thing is that you need to be scheduling when you're going to push. Because at the end of the day, another comparison that I make quite frequently is how business is like interval training. There are times where we push and times where we pull back. And so usually my clients, depending on the industry, will operate on like a quarterly, like push session, like something, whether we're pushing out a new product, a new service, just getting like pushing a certain marketing channel for new lead acquisition. So thinking about those things of like, where am I going to push so that I also know where I'm going to pull back. So you have a clear picture of like your entire year of like, okay, I'm going to be off 1 week a quarter, and then 1 week a quarter or 2 weeks a quarter is going to be heavier. That's where I'm going to take on more projects. That's where I'm going to push the capacity so I can see what needs to be adjusted efficiency-wise, or what needs to be delegated to team, or what new team members need to be brought on. And so those push periods show us what's possible. It helps us to identify gaps, and it helps us to obviously reach new clientele and new customers. But we need to know when we're pushing. And it also, when you schedule when you're pulling back and resting, and when you schedule when you're pushing, it becomes permission, right? And we need that when we're making this transition from pushing all the time to oscillating. Because if we don't have that permission, what we find we naturally fall into as entrepreneurs, because we are so ambitious, is that we will just have the desire to push all the time, which again is not sustainable and will not be successful long term. And then the last thing that I want to mention is, in order to apply periodization to our businesses, we need to plan ahead. And it sounds silly and it sounds like, okay, this is something that we all know as business owners. Of course, we have to plan ahead. But planning ahead, like I'm talking about here with your push periods, with your pullback periods, and then also just having a plan of what is of highest priority, right? So when I was training for powerlifting, I had to have a clear plan of like how I was going to PR my lifts, how I was going to get stronger. And that required me having periods of time where I was adding more weight to the bar. And so seeing your full plan laid out of where you're pushing, what you're pushing, when you're pushing, and then when you're resting, when you're pulling back, when you're focusing more on your business rather than being in your business, and laying this out, you'll be able to see if it's balanced, right? You'll be able to see, oh my gosh, I put 4 launches in a row with no rest in between. And so that is why it's important to have a plan and step back into a place of observation and overview where you look at that full plan. We can't get stronger without a plan. We can't get better without a plan. And so planning and taking time for planning is really important. And that's why a lot of business owners will come to me for my VIP day, because that is a full day planning session for you and for your business. Because unless we have some sort of accountability to sit down and do that, it is absolutely something that gets pushed to the back burner, which I talked about on my episode of Behind the Scenes of my own VIP planning day. So I hope that this has given you some helpful insights today to think about how you can apply periodization to your business, the things that you need to be implementing into your business so that you can have more work-life balance, so that you cannot be on this one-way street towards burnout and overwhelm. Because at the end of the day, I want you to succeed. I want you to be around for a long time. I want you to create an impactful legacy with your business. And I want you to be able to do that and help as many people as possible. And in order for us to do that, we need to be able to sustain. And in order to sustain, we need to periodize. So thank you guys for listening. Let me know if you have questions, thoughts. I love when you guys send me DMs on Instagram and just let me know that you're listening, that it's helpful. And of course, if you have any topics that you want me to talk about, especially in 2025, that are a focus for you or a goal for you or an obstacle that you're running into, don't hesitate to send me all of your questions, all of your thoughts, and I can pop it into an episode just for you. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.